You guys know where I have to begin with this. Zoran Mamdani is the mayoral elect for the for New York City after an extraordinary campaign beginning last November. Zoran ascended to the highest levels of politics and brought down the scumbag pervert Andrew Cuomo by nearly 10 percentage points. This is nothing short of remarkable. Zoran is a 34-year-old Muslim democratic socialist who is going to be the mayor of the largest city in the country and one of the most culturally and economically impactful cities on the planet. This is a massive W for the progressive movement in the United States, but also worldwide at a time when authoritarianism is creeping. It is at a time when authoritarianism is making its way through so many democracies, not only in Europe, but also in places like South Korea. Zoran is a beacon of light. He is a glimmer of hope. He is a shred of optimism for everybody who has a strong belief in working class solidarity and progressive politics. Uh, this is the most hope I've had since getting involved in politics about 7, 8 years ago. I was a little late on the Bernie campaign. I was not a Bernie bro when I first dove into politics, but is my Zoran is my Bernie Sanders. I've been cheering for him for, I don't want to say since he started his campaign, but definitely at the beginning of this year when he really started gaining prominence. I love everything about him, but most importantly, I love and agree wholeheartedly with his policy prescription: fast and free buses, raising taxes on the wealthy, raising taxes on corporations, government run grocery stores, universal child care. All of these are core to my beliefs. But more importantly, all of these things are well within the executive power of the mayor of New York City. We have an interview with him on ABC. But before we get into that, I want to issue a gigantic fuck you to Andrew Cuomo. I want to issue a gigantic fuck you to all of the billionaires that donated against Zohran Mamdani. Fuck Michael Bloomberg. Fuck Bill Ackman. Fuck Donald Trump for endorsing Andrew Cuomo. Fuck JD Vance and Stephen Miller and Elon Musk for endorsing Andrew Cuomo as well. Andrew Cuomo killed 16,000 seniors who were living in nursing homes during the COVID pandemic, and he covered it up. Andrew Cuomo credibly assaulted 13 women. Andrew Cuomo stole millions of dollars for the MTA. He is a disgusting, perverted, reprehensible ghoul, and there is nothing more that I take joy in than watching this fucking loser have his political career brought to an end by a Democratic socialist. I'm smoking on that Andrew Cuomo pack. The eyes are rolling in the back of my head. Fuck Andrew Cuomo. Rest in peace, Bozo. And it's still called the Tappan Zee Bridge, by the way. No New Yorker is calling that shit the Mario Cuomo Bridge. But without further ado, I don't want this to be a hateful episode unless it's towards Andrew Cuomo. I want to talk about all of the good things that are going to happen with Zohran Mamdani as the mayor of New York City. Let's listen to what he has to say to George Stephanopoulos. We'll take a look at some exit polls. Afterward, we will take a look at just the overall electoral statistics. Look, they recorded this interview Wednesday morning. It was published on YouTube 9 hours ago at the time of this recording. So at about 9 a.m. Eastern, Zohran didn't give his victory speech until like 10:30 last night. It was late. It was well after he was declared the victor in this race. And I highly doubt that this man slept more than 3 hours. I mean, you could tell, like, he's looking a little sleepy at this point, but the I, I can't imagine the adrenaline that Zohran has or had flowing through his veins at the time of this interview. I do also want to make note of this. The only person who called Zohran Mamdani to congratulate him on his victory was Curtis Sliwa. Andrew Cuomo, despite conceding the race, did not call Zohran to congratulate him. Eric Adams, by the way, Eric Adams, I think almost got beat by total write-ins yesterday, which is fucking hilarious. Eric Adams, the sitting mayor, did not call Zohran to congratulate him. Do with that information what you will. I'm once again having um I'm once again having this fucking audio problem. Like, I don't understand why my computer doesn't fucking I don't understand why my computer doesn't recognize this. What the fuck?
Zohran Mamdani, congratulations. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you very much for having me.
You broke a lot of new ground last night. First Muslim mayor of New York, first Democratic Socialist, first mayor to win more than 1 million votes in, 3 decades, youngest mayor in more than a century. So what is the message and the mandate behind that?
The message is about
Zohran Mamdani broke 1 million votes. He received 1 million votes and counting. It was the first mayoral candidate in New York City to eclipse the 1 million vote mark since 1969. There were nearly 2 million people that turned out for this election. It was enormous. It was presidential election levels of turnout on Tuesday.
transforming the most expensive city in the United States of America into one that's affordable for each and every New Yorker. And what New Yorkers across the 5 boroughs gave us last night was a mandate to pursue the most ambitious affordability agenda the city has seen since the days of Fiorello LaGuardia. And it's time that we start to deliver it.
Well, let's dig into that, because you're talking about a rent freeze, you're talking about free buses, you're talking about free childcare. Can you do that without raising taxes?
I think you can do that, and I think you have to raise taxes on the top 1% of New Yorkers who make more than $1 million a year, and you do that by raising taxes on by them 2%. And then you also increase the corporate tax of New York State to match that of New Jersey. So that takes us from about 7.25 to about 11.5%, which is what we see in New Jersey. These things together raise about $9 billion, which more than pays for our economic agenda and also starts to Trump-proof our city.
But are you worried that could drive?
I think I was watching Hassan Piker cover this yesterday, and he raised an excellent question, a counter question to what the fuck George Stephanopoulos is asking. It's always, how are you going to pay for it when talking about social safety nets and programs that will materially benefit the working class? How the fuck is Andrew Cuomo, or how the fuck would Andrew Cuomo have paid for 5,000 cops? The salaries, the benefits, the overtime. The New York City Police Department has a budget of like $12 billion. And yet no one ever asks, my camera, oh my God. This is the APAC lobby fucking up the content for you guys with my speakers not working, my camera not working. Holy fuck. There we go. This economic plan is not only feasible, but overly favorable. The working class, the 99%, wants higher taxes on the wealthy. I'm sure they want higher taxes than what Zohran is proposing, because admittedly his tax plan is very conservative as far as progressive taxation goes. Reminder, it is a 2% increase. It is a 2% flat increase, which means at the highest levels of this, you are only going to be taxed an additional $20,000, regardless of if you make $1 million or it's at the most 20. It's oh my God, I can't do math. A flat 2% tax rate on $1 million is $20,000. These people are not going to leave New York City over that. Additionally, people want fucking corporations to be taxed as well. Like Amazon should be paying more in taxes. Walmart, CVS, all of these corporations should be paying more in taxes instead of giving fucking stock buybacks to their shareholders.
Drive a lot of job creators out of New York.
So what I've heard from a number of business leaders,
This is dude. This line of questioning is so tired. The people who are leaving New York are not the wealthy. It is lower and middle income earners who can't afford the rent and the property taxes. Rich dipshits like Michael Bloomberg and Bill Sucks at Tennis Man are not leaving. The earnings potential is too high for them. They're going to fucking suck it up and pay this extra 2%.
is that the affordability crisis is also affecting their ability to attract and retain talent. The city's inability to provide childcare means that businesses often have to provide stipends for that childcare. Right now, the absence of universal childcare means that a family will pay around $22,500 a year, which is more money than many of them would spend if they sent that same kid to college 18 years later. And it is time for city government to actually step up to the responsibility that it has.
Not just the city government, that kind of a tax increase is going to require the state as well, including the governor, Kathy Hochul. Is she on board?
You know, I'm proud to have Governor Kathy Hochul's endorsement and the endorsement of our agenda, specifically universal child care. And I've said time and again, I think these are the two most direct and straightforward ways to raise this revenue. If there are other ways to raise this funds, the most important thing is that we actually fund this agenda.
You said
Just to go back and touch on the small business owner thing, you encounter this kind of backlash when you talk about Medicare for all. Oh, think of the small businesses. How are they like? Pardon me. Oh, how are small businesses gonna deal with being taxed more and this, that, whatever? Well, the business, at least in the Medicare for all instance, the business already has to pay for their employees' benefits. In the long run, they will be, not even in the long run, fucking immediately, they will be spending less money on healthcare. Very much like how you may be taxed a little bit more to pay for Medicare for all, but ultimately, you're still paying less in taxes than you would by way of your fucking health insurance premium. It's the same. It's the same when you talk about any progressive economic agenda. These programs pay for themselves.
President Trump was watching you last night. It appears that he was watching you. And it also appears that he and other Republicans are trying to make you the poster boy of the Democratic Party. Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House, calls you a true extremist and a Marxist. And he says now every House Democrat incumbent and candidate will co-own Mamdani's disastrous record in the 2026 midterms. How do you respond to that?
Well, I'm looking forward to showing the power of an example here in New York City, an example of what it means to not just diagnose the despair in working people's lives as the cost of living crisis, but to deliver on it. And that's the contrast between myself and President Trump. He's someone who ran an entire presidential campaign on the promise of cheaper groceries and is now, as the president, making it harder for Americans to afford those groceries by cutting SNAP benefits.
You worried he's going to crack down on New York City?
We'll talk about this a little bit later, but the Republican the evilness of the Republican Party is a primary driver in why the Republicans got so thoroughly thrashed. It's because the voters looked at what was happening and said to themselves, oh my God, this fucking sucks. This guy, Donald Trump, and all of his cronies are not doing anything they said they were going to do. And they gave the Republican Party a massive fucking middle finger. And it's so weird to me that people are still not focusing on that aspect of Trump's presidency, how he ran on affordability, and all he's done so far is deport your landscaper and bomb fishermen off the coast of Venezuela.
maybe even do what he's done and tried to do in Portland and other cities, call the National Guard in?
You know, I think that his threats are inevitable. I also know that it's time we actually call this for what it is. This has nothing to do with safety. It has to do with intimidation. If it was safety, President Trump would be threatening to deploy the National Guard to the top 10 states of crime, 8 out of which are all Republican-led, but because of that party, he won't actually be doing so.
So you say you won't be intimidated. How do you stand up to it?
I think there's a number of ways. The first thing is you actually utilize the courts. You stop treating things as being law just by virtue of the fact that President Trump is saying them. You can look at the example of California, where you find the Attorney General, the Governor, and the Mayor of LA coming together, filing a lawsuit in opposition to the deployment of the National Guard. A federal judge found in their favor, and the Attorney General estimated that for every dollar they spent, they recovered more than $30,000 in funds that would have otherwise been seized by the federal government.
How about crime? Have you convinced
The Republican Party, and more specifically Donald Trump, Stephen Miller, and everybody in the executive branch, their utilization of the National Guard, of ICE, it's all rooted in attempting to intimidate the overwhelming majority of citizens. Fascism rises or attempts to rise based on fear. The fear of retaliation, intimidation, as Zohran mentioned. But if you stand up to that, they will back down. It is Donald Trump is a bully. And what happens when you stand up to a bully? They back down because they're not tough. They're pussies. They're insecure little bitches. But you do have to put up a fight. Taking the example of California, as much as I despise Gavin Newsom, he is gaining popularity as a 2028 presidential candidate because people are looking around, and he's one of like 3 Democrats doing anything to combat Donald Trump, whether that be in more liberal ways like posting online, posting AI-generated images of Trump crying, of Gavin Newsom pushing him around in a stroller, but also more tangible ways, as Zohran just mentioned, by filing lawsuits to prevent the deployment of the National Guard in his state. This kind of shit works, but you need leaders that have a fucking backbone.
Commissioner Tisch to stand, the police commissioner?
You know, I have made my decision to retain Commissioner Tisch, and I've done so because Eric Adams had stacked the upper echelons of the NYPD with incompetence and corruption. She came in, started to tackle that, deliver accountability, and reduce crime across the 5 boroughs. That is what we would build upon under a Mamdani administration, in addition to creating a Department of Community Safety to tackle the mental health and homelessness crisis head on.
You've made your decision. Has she made hers?
I am looking forward to continue to having conversations with her and to assembling a government of the best and the brightest to deliver on this agenda.
You know, last night you also said you wanted to reach out to New Yorkers who didn't vote for you. Probably highest on that list is Jewish New Yorkers. It looks like there was about a 30-point gap, according to the exit polls, between you and former Governor Cuomo. How do you convince those voters that your vision of New York includes them and your victory is not a threat to them?
You know, I was on the M57 not too long ago, which is the slowest bus in New York City, 4.9 miles an hour. And I was seated next to a woman who introduced herself to me as a speech therapist. And she told me that she was Jewish, and she said that her daughter is a huge fan and phone banks from college, and that she wasn't so sure. And I asked her to share, and she shared her thoughts about what it also means to be Jewish in New York City today, and the scourge of anti-Semitism that often worries her, that she was trying to sell her apartment. A realtor told her to put away, in her words, the Jewish books on her bookshelf. And I told her that this was unacceptable, that we were fighting for a city that didn't just protect Jewish New Yorkers, but celebrated and cherished those same New Yorkers. And I'm looking forward to being the mayor for every single person that calls the city home, and showing that my job is not to remake City Hall in my image, but rather in the image of struggling New Yorkers. And that means New Yorkers will find themselves and their struggles in people who have decision-making power across my administration.
You said a lot of
You will not get this type of rhetoric from notable Republicans. When you talk to any progressive individual, any left-wing, anybody with left-wing ideology, a sincere leftist, they will say outright, and I say this as well, it doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter if you're a fucking Nazi, if you're a constitutional conservative, or if you're an anarchist or a communist. All of the things that I advocate for, I'm talking about me specifically, and because Zohran is talking like this, all of those things that I advocate for, I will extend to you as well. Even if you're a Nazi, I still want you to have health care. I still want you to be paid a living wage. I still want you to have time off guaranteed to you by the federal government. And I want that because it's basic humanity. I believe in being selfless. I believe in having compassion for other people. Donald Trump looks at half the country and tells them straight up to go fuck themselves. He calls Democrats the enemy of the people, the enemy from within. People close to his administration have called Democrats scumbags, lowlives, Jew haters, animals, scum. They say all of these things, and it's just not an overall beneficial message, especially in electoral politics when you're trying to appeal to as many people as possible. It's also just really disgusting and dehumanizing to talk about people in this manner. And it's part of this reason as to why Zohran won by such a comfortable margin.
That during the campaign, but it didn't seem to work with this group of voters. What more can you do now?
Well, I think there are a lot of voters for whom the trust comes from the actions that you actually take. Many have have understandably been disappointed by politics and the promises that have been made by many before me. Now my opportunity is actually to deliver as the next mayor of the city.
I was struck by a tweet that came out last night on X from Bill Ackman, who was one of your biggest opponents in the campaign. Billionaire, spent a lot of money trying to defeat
Bill
you,
Ackman.
but he did congratulate you and say he wants you to call on him to help New York. What are you going to call on him to do?
Well, I appreciated his words, and I think what I find is that there is a needed commitment from leaders of the city to speak and work with anyone who is committed to lowering the cost of living in the city, and that's something that I will fulfill.
Thanks for coming in this morning.
I don't like that answer. I gotta be a little, nitpicky. Obviously, Zohran can't tell Bill Ackman to go fuck himself. But that's what Bill Ackman should do. If I was the mayor of New York City, I don't give a fuck what billionaire is calling my phone. I'm not answering because even though I want to extend all of these privileges to you, you are not my priority. My priority are lower and middle income earners. But again, as I said, Zohran just can't tell Bill Ackman to go fuck himself. That's so I'll do it for him. We're gonna look at some exit polling on this. Now, it is important to remember that exit polls are not the most reliable. However, this particular exit poll from NBC News is mostly just demographic data. In fact, I think it's entirely demographic data. That is significantly more reliable because there's no way to fudge these questions. It's not an open-ended question about Israel. It's like, what do you identify as? Are you male, female, non-binary, trans? It's like, are you a man? Are you a woman? What ethnicity? Are you black, white, Latino, Asian? You can't fudge that data. So at the time of this recording, there's about 145,000 votes left to be counted. Zohran has what is that? Like a fucking an 8.5-ish percentage point lead. It's almost 9 percentage points with 1 million votes and counting. So let's go ahead. Let's look at let's take a borough by borough look. We're going to start in, where do we want to start? Let's start with Staten Island. Staten Island overwhelmingly voted for Andrew Cuomo. That's not a shock. 55.4% in what is the most conservative portion of New York City. There was absolutely no chance that Zohran won this borough. It wasn't going to fucking happen. The majority of the ground made up by Zohran came in the Bronx and in Brooklyn. The Bronx, more so for its minority population, its Black and Hispanic population, and Brooklyn by way of its ideological population. Obviously, a lot of different cultures living in Brooklyn as well, white, black, Hispanic. But Brooklyn has the appropriately named Commie Corridor because it is the most progressive part of the city. In Manhattan, where is Manhattan? Manhattan, Zohran got about 53% of the vote compared to Cuomo's 43%. What's interesting about this is Zohran actually won the financial district, and this played out in the primary as well. And some people were flabbergasted by this. Oh my God, all of these rich people are voting for Zohran. Are they fucking stupid? And it's like, no. But all of these highly educated individuals, whether they're stockbrokers, doctors, lawyers, they very much like the working class population understands that they're being extorted by the fucking landlords. They're being extorted by all of the same sectors that the working class is being extorted by. Do you think that a stockbroker who lives in the financial district of the Upper East Side doesn't know that him paying $4,000 a month for a one bedroom apartment is not fucking preposterous? Everybody knows that. In terms of exit polls, Zoran's biggest voting block was young voters, specifically 18 to 29-year-olds, and even as old as 49. This is astounding data. So I think, is this cut off in OBS? It is. Let me adjust this real quick. 18 to 29-year-olds voted 78% for Zohran. 30 to 44-year-olds, 66%. And then obviously, the older they get, the more that diminishes. But Cuomo had a considerable margin amongst the 45 and older demographic. 18 to 44-year-olds, still 70%. What else? So here we go. Age by no, let's not do age by race. Let's just do race in general. White people, it was about even between Zohran and Cuomo, 45% and 46% respectively. But the minority vote, and remember, in the 2024 presidential election, Donald Trump was able to win by way of making considerable gains with each minority community, the black population, the Latino population, and the Asian population as well. The black population, 57% for Mamdani. The Hispanic population, 52%. The Asian population, 62%. All in total, 56% of non-white voters voted for Zohran Mamdani. I do actually want to jump back over to age by race. I was very critical of young white men in the 2024 presidential election, even though I understood why they voted for Donald Trump. I understand the apathy that they have. I understand their nihilism. But white men, shout out to you. Shout out to you, especially white millennials. White 18 to 29-year-olds, 66% for Zohran. White 30 to 44-year-olds, 67% for Zohran. These only get higher with each and every other race. Black millennials, 84%. Latino millennials, 86%. All others, 58%. Just really incredible stuff from Zohran in this election. There's really no other way for me to describe it. On political matters, do you consider yourself very liberal? 84%. Mind you, this includes people like myself who are technically not liberal, whether they be outright socialists, sock dems, democratic socialists, people who are to the left of liberalism. There was a fascinating poll that came out recently that said like 67% or 63% of Democrats identify as progressives, whatever that may be, socialists, progressive, whatever. As George Stephanopoulos pointed to, only 32% of the Jewish population voted for Zohran, but he got overwhelming support from non-religious folks as well. Yeah. Is this the first time you have ever voted in an election for mayor? 66% of yes voters voted for Zohran. That is what put him over the edge. But this didn't happen by accident. This wasn't a this wasn't it didn't just appear. These voters did not just appear for Zohran. He compelled them to vote. One of my most staunch criticisms of Kamala Harris last year was how her agenda did not excite anybody. She didn't compel the voter to go out and vote for her. And it's because for far too long, the Democratic Party has felt that just not being Republican is enough. No, the voters have spoken overwhelmingly. You have to have an actual progressive agenda if you want a real enthusiastic fan base. We've seen it with Bernie, with AOC, with Rashida Tlaib, with Zohran Mamdani. Hopefully we see it with Omar Feta in Minnesota, with Graham Plattner in Maine. Being a diet Republican is simply not enough.